All right, good morning or good afternoon, everybody. Today is Wednesday, June the 2nd, 2021. And I have to say, when I was doing preparation for today's Kraken episode this morning, there was quite a bit of news to report on. And luckily, I waited a little bit more because some news is still coming out as we speak. But anyways, speaking of which, today's Wednesday, hump day, right? I mean, I don't know about you guys, but this week seems to be going by at a pretty decent pace for me. I don't usually track that kind of stuff, but, sometimes when you wake up and you go, oh shit, it's already, Wednesday or Thursday. Hey, it's kind of interesting, right? So the first thing is that we're going to jump right into it. The Chinese state media says that the country should prepare for nuclear war with the US after Biden asked for a COVID probe into, I would imagine, the Wuhan lab leak and things like that. This is within the country. This is coming from the state-run media, the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. I don't know how seriously this is being taken within the intelligence community of, MI6, the CIA, the Mossad, the Russian intelligence, things like that. Again, more than likely, I would imagine, unless there's an angle that I'm missing here, it seems as though this is just a fear factor. But to tell even your own people, even if it's just relative to the confines of your own country, within your own nation, to tell them to prepare for nuclear war. First off, how do you prepare for nuclear war? I mean, make your own bunker? Do you know how many people there are in China? I'm not saying that this should be taken literally, but at the end of the day, when they say things like this, I have no idea. Now, with that being said, I'm not going to lie, folks. If you had, said to me a year or two ago, Dave, China said prepare for nuclear war to their people, what do you think? I would have laughed it off a bit more than I do now. The tensions do seem to be pretty high. And again, this could all be just a puppet show. I'm sure that a lot of it is. But at the same time, the question becomes how much of that emotion from world leaders of the front end of the puppet show, if you will, conflate or transition into the back end of things. And that's what it comes down to, right? Because ironically enough, on a public level, from my understanding, Xi Jinping calls for, and I quote, lovable diplomatic approach between other nations, which is contrary to what his own party is spreading within their state-run media. So again, this could be part of my English. This could be a bit of an intelligence mindfuck. This could be a way to mess with the other media outlets of Europe, of the West. It's hard to say. It's really hard to say. I'm not sure what the objective is here by saying that. Again, if it's just simply to scare the Chinese people into making them, or trying to make them think, the West is bad, this and that. It could be working, it could not be. It's hard to say. Again, I don't want to report on things if I haven't been there myself, or I don't want to report on things in a confident way unless I've been there myself, or I can surely say with my own self-confidence, this is probably how it is. At this moment, we don't know how it is, this situation. So it'll be very interesting to see what comes up. But again, what's so frightening to me, honestly, is the fact that we could wake up at any time, any day, and a nuclear bomb could be dropped. Not on our country or wherever you live, but just somewhere in the world. That is frightening. That is scary. I mean, I think there is no other way of putting it. The next thing is that new emails reveal, and we'll be discussing this in the members episode and maybe in the public episode, depending on how extensively I could speak on it without being censored. But new emails reveal that a Wuhan lab funder, a big-time funder of the Wuhan lab, personally thanked Dr. Fauci for dismissing the lab leak theory at first. Because again, it would have looked bad. Certain things would have not appeared as, I guess you could say, appropriate relative to the accuracy of things like the CDC or the NIH. So everything would have just looked like a shit show from the beginning. So again, we've seen, for example, the Washington Post, from my understanding, even Vox, the outlet Vox, shadow editing a lot of their articles, because Trump said it was a lab leak, or it could have been a lab leak, and the mainstream media had to just go against them for the sake of saying, no, it's a conspiracy theory, don't believe it, when now it could have been a lab leak. It's not about saying Trump is right. It's just a matter of the fact of how about we question everything first, not listen to either political party, in my humble opinion, and then we narrow down by process of elimination, assuming the intelligence communities are telling the truth on a public level. We eliminate it by process of elimination. What is the most likely outcome here? I have friends and family, folks, personally, that said to me this time last year, Dave, there's no way it came from a lab, impossible. I never fought back with them, and I'll tell you why. Because I didn't know where it came from. Do you know what I mean? I didn't subscribe to what the mainstream media was saying was that it came from a bat, but I also didn't not subscribe to the lab leak theory. The best thing to do is to approach something not believing in anything, but having your mind open to everything, right? And I'm not trying to lecture here anybody by any means, but you folks see what I'm saying? I had friends and family, Dave, no, there's no chance it was a lab leak. Why? Because the WHO, the CDC, the mainstream media in the West was saying it wasn't a lab leak. And then all of a sudden, if I try to call them out on it, they'll just say, well, Dave, it's just a process of, intelligence research. And it turns out this was the case. Yeah. So why did you dismiss it in the beginning? This is kind of one of the reasons why I started the show, because the concept is that anything is possible. What science said on a public level was not possible 3-4 years ago is now all of a sudden possible. They found life under 40,000 feet of Arctic ice sheets, from my understanding, when they thought it was not possible to find life there. Now, again, without ranting too much, this, leads into what we discuss mainly on the show with the main episodes and the members episodes about how, this is the way of drop feeding. But again, this is what bothers me so much. I'm not saying, to my friends and family that they were wrong. I'm not trying to say, oh, gotcha, or told you so. I'm saying, how about we approach things with an open mindset of all angles before we say with confidence, oh, no, this is it, just because the mainstream media said it. Right? So the next thing is that, let's take a look here. Isaac Herzog, hopefully I said his name correctly, has now been elected as the new president of Israel with 87 votes from members of the Knesset. Again, Netanyahu, like I said, it turns out maybe he didn't have an ace up his sleeve. It seemed like there was political strategy in order to remove him. I don't think people wanted him gone per se. I think that Netanyahu served his purpose, if you will. Again, the longest serving prime minister of Israel ever, at least in the history of modern Israel. And at the same time, he had a very good run. I mean, he was in the IDF forces when he was younger, as I think most are required to if you're growing up in Israel. He went to, he had a phenomenal life, that guy, let's be honest. Whether or not you think he's a war criminal, which, again, arguments could be made for both sides, but, he went to Yale, I think he went to Harvard, he was in the military, he was then ambassador to the United Nations. I mean, it was just, the guy had a very good run politically. He was defeated, then he came back. It was a whole thing. Who knows if he'll try to come back again, or if his political career is over, maybe he might move into the private sector of things. Who knows what he'll do next. But again, like I said, folks, he had a very good run. So yeah, we'll see what happens with this Prime Minister Herzog. So the next thing is that a large Iranian Navy ship sinks after catching fire. Again, always having to do with, I'm not trying to come across in the wrong way, but always having to do with Iran, or a country that seems to be, I guess we could say, unstable from the optics of the world stage. That doesn't mean they're actually unstable, but it's interesting how these mistakes keep happening. I'm not saying it's a conspiracy, but it's interesting how it happens more often. Now, we could say, yes, their military or their general infrastructure is not built up as much as the West or China or Russia, but I mean, these things just keep on happening, and it all ends up coming back to Iran one way or another, seemingly. Now, I'm not saying it is Iran or the Iranian government specifically, and the reason for that is because the mainstream media could be infiltrated by the CIA to plant those stories in there and keep pointing the direction towards Iran. So again, folks, we got to be vigilant of that too, right? We have to call things like they could be. So the next thing is that, as well as how they are, obviously, the next thing is that Iran has also banned crypto mining because they said it consumes too much energy. Again, this is, we talk about this a lot in the members episodes and on the Zoom calls and things like that, but we discuss we could sort of say the mind games of this, if you will, how sometimes it is true that it's using too much energy, these quantum computers and things like that. Other times it isn't. It's interesting to say the least, I'll tell you that. And the final thing pertaining to Iran is that there was an Iranian container ship that was hit in the Mediterranean in a small explosion, but nobody was hurt. So again, interesting who caused the explosion. It may have been a self-remote detonating bomb. It seemed like nobody actually set the bomb off within that particular vicinity. So could it have been set off somewhere else? We probably won't know. It probably is already being taken up by Iranian intelligence, right? So we'll never know for certain. The next thing is that Israel plans to ask the US for $1 billion to replenish the Iron Dome. And they're probably going to get it. They probably will. Again, this goes back to the whole support concept of the West backing Israel more strongly than others. Again, a lot of people will say, we have no problem with Israel being replenished for the Iron Dome, but how come Palestine doesn't get the Iron Dome? Because now it'll even the playing field, which will presumably make both sides less likely to engage in battle quicker, because they'll now know they both have the Iron Dome, and it's kind of like, okay, it's a tit for tat thing. Do we really want to go to war with each other? Then there's other people, again, this goes back to the whole Israel-Palestine conflict. It is, ultimately, that's what it comes down to. It's unfortunate, but a lot of things, that are given to Israel from the West, a lot of people, it's been open for criticism, saying, how come you won't give it to Palestine either, right? Or the people in the Gaza Strip. Now, that's a little bit more black and white, if you will, presumably, because, of Hamas and things like that. But again, we have to understand the full context of things before we say things conclusively as well, right? So the next thing is that an Iraq militia leader has been arrested, but the question becomes, will this signal change? Now, what's interesting is that I see the global outlets discussing, will this signal change in Iraq because one militia leader has been arrested. If that militia leader, which I don't know much about, had significant influence amongst other terrorist or militia cells, if you will, within Iraq, there may be a shortage of influence unless this person had someone to replace him already, or her, probably a he though, in this case. But unless there's a replacement, I see it very similar to that of the drug business. You always have someone that's going to replace the drug dealer that just got arrested or killed, right? It's the same, no matter at what level, whether it's the street level or the higher organized crime level, it's the same concept. You're going to have someone to replace them. Now, what's interesting about this, though, is that it seems like the mainstream media seems to ignore, and I'm not trying to be a smart ass here or anything like that, but from my understanding, the mainstream media seems to be ignoring the apparatus of a counterinsurgency operation, because it seems like a counterinsurgency operation takes many months, if not many years, and those who have served may, I'm sure, know this better than I do, what special counterinsurgents operations and how long they take. So to say that this one Iraqi militia leader being arrested is going to change the whole nation, I very strongly doubt that, unless I'm completely missing something. But even then, we'll see what happens, right? So the next thing is that JBS blames Russian criminals for an attack that shut down meat production, but the meat packer, JBS, said they have made significant progress in resolving the cyber attack and that most plants should be reopened by Wednesday. But the attack did wipe out 1/5 of the U.S.'s meat capacity. When they said it'll be back by Wednesday, I don't know if they mean Wednesday as in today or next Wednesday, from the day I'm recording this. So it'll be hard to say. Interesting to speculate on at the very least. With that being said, though, at the same time, again, this is what I think. I'm not saying that it was Russia, or I'm not trying to say confidently it was, but for the sake of hypotheticals, let's go with the mainstream narrative of saying, they blame Russian criminals, even though I have yet to see evidence. But anyways, it would be in line with what Putin was saying with regards to Russia's response being asymmetrical. He said that, I think, of 2 or 3 weeks ago at his own at Russia's own version of the State of the Union, if you will. Doesn't mean that this was Russia in this particular case. Could have been another country in a proxy war doing something for Iran, doing something for China. Who knows, right? And that's the other thing too. I don't like this whole thing about Russia, because yes, has Russia been guilty for many things asymmetrically and in the cyber world? I'm sure. But the problem is that when you exaggerate it and you make up lies about things Russia maybe had nothing to do with, you then begin to question everything, right? It's just like, no matter how much money the mainstream media, the intelligence community had, the way in which human beings think, as long as they start to wake up to the way in which these tactics are made privy to the public, it's going to be more difficult to trick the people, right? And I think the people are waking up, not saying Russia's innocent, but again, to say every little thing is blamed on Russia or is because of Russia, it could be, but it also could not be, right? So again, and this is why it's the Russia propaganda concept, I just want to mention very quickly before I go on, has been instilled so strongly within the Western media. I would even say European media, but the Western media, in the sense of like, for example, I was reading a CNN article the other day about this, about a previous cyber attack, and it said sources tell CNN that the Russians were behind this. What sources? This is the problem. And I'm not saying they have to give up their sources, but at this point it comes down to trust. Do you trust them or not? Because sometimes the sources are real, sometimes they're a lot of the time they're bullshit. So, I mean, that's what it comes down to. If you don't have trust in the system, how could you trust the institutions in those systems? It's the same idea, right? So the next thing is that the president of Chile is encouraging open dialogue to form a new constitution. I am not familiar too much with the politics of Chile. I'm not sure why the president would want to form a new constitution. There could be, I'm sure some of you are from there or know more about it than I do, or have family or friends there. Again, if it's for a beneficial reason, it's all about relativity and perspective, right? Is it really a down the middle political issue that's going on there? It really depends what's happening. Is there something that the president sees that is a clear problem, regardless of what political view you hold, that needs to be resolved, right? So we'll see what happens there. The next thing is that Brazil's COVID economic rebound is stronger than expected, allegedly. Okay, this is interesting, and I see a lot of countries around the world that at least it's being reported, not saying it's true, but it's being reported that the economic rebound is phenomenal and it's better than it's ever been, and this whole thing for the UK and for many different countries. And I say, I say that's a very good thing, but at the end of the day too, I also say, what did people expect? What did people expect when things were going to slowly start, hopefully again, opening up again? People just want to get back to work, and there's a lot of people who have not been infected with COVID allegedly, or with what they call COVID, that say, listen, if I catch it, I catch it. Let's go back to work. And it seems like there's enough people to get the economy moving in a lot of countries again. But again, this is assuming that this report is accurate. It's unfortunate that I got to question every little thing, but the next thing is that the mayor of Budapest is trying to rename streets in protest against China. I guess the CCP or the country itself. Again, I just want to stress, look, he's the mayor of Budapest. If he wants to do what he wants, if he can do it, then let him do it. If there's certain street names named after something in the Chinese culture or something like this, should he, again, it depends what the streets are named after, right? If they're named after a person in the CCP or something like that, then I totally get it. But if it's named after something within Chinese culture or Chinese history, that's got nothing to do with the COVID leak, in my humble opinion. Just like I say all the time, a lot of Chinese people are great people. Sure, you got bad apples everywhere, but we have to be looking at the regime, not the people. You can't just say a couple billion of those in China or whatever the population amount is today, they're all CCP. You can't say that, right? So we'll see what happens there, but I'd like to know the names of those streets. I haven't had the time to look into that. The next thing is that Florida has banned, specifically Governor Ron DeSantis signed a bill banning transgender athletes from female sports. Transgender females. I'm assuming this is when a man or a male transitions to a female, and the whole argument is, well, because they're biologically a male, their muscle fibers, their muscle tissues will be much stronger, therefore they're going to literally obliterate metaphorically and literally and physically their opponents if they go from a man to a woman, and now they're competing against other women. Now, the question becomes this, and I myself don't have the answer, obviously. The question becomes, what about if this male was going through a sex change or transition from a very young age, from the age of 7, 8, 9, or 10. And I'm not saying that to justify anything. I'm saying that because I'm genuinely asking the question. And I myself don't have the answer. I don't know to what extent the medical technology is available to the public for that to happen, because at least the idea scientifically is that when they're much younger, if you can if you can change their muscle tissues and their fibers from a young age during the transition process, then maybe they might actually be weaker from a muscular perspective. With that being said, though, I also want to say from a mental perspective, not even mental health, just from a mental perspective, man, if you know from the age of, because again, assuming you have to be under the age of 17 or 16 or much younger in order for your muscle tissues to go from male to female to weaken substantially, you better really know what you want in your life if you're that young and you want to transition. And I'm saying that respectfully, and I would say that the other way around too, from a woman to a man. I would say, again, not to talk down to people, but you better know what you want. Especially if you're 10, 11 years old, and you tell your parents, I want to transition, and your parents allow you, you better know what you really want. I mean, it's true. It's true, right? It's one thing if you're 25. It's another thing if you're 15 and you want to transition. Right? The question then becomes, to what extent does the medical technology then allow for that to weaken the male muscle tissues and transition to a female? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, right? That's the other big debate as well. And is there a certain age limit, if you will, of growth where you can't reverse that muscle tissue? I think, honestly, they have the technology at a secretive level to change humans into whatever they want. We discussed that on the public episode, members, all that, that. But you know, relative to what's available publicly is what I'm speaking on. So, and again, from a political perspective, this might be controversial, but again, it's the states' rights, and if the next governor is not Ron DeSantis, I believe they could reverse this. So, again, this is the respective, the understanding and the perspective of the state of Florida. So be it, and that's one of the beautiful things I like about the U.S. If you don't like it in one state, you can always head to another state that probably caters more to what you prefer, whether it's taxes, culture, or something like this, right? Of all people. So the next thing is that oil spill fears as a chemical laden cargo ship sunk over the coast of Sri Lanka. Again, they got these oil spills, man. I'm not saying they're done on purpose, not at all, but whether they are or not, they gotta stop. I'm not even trying to be a pro environment or whatever. It's just stop putting shit in the clean water, you know? And if the water's already dirty, you're just adding more shit to the shit that's in the water. So, I mean, fuck that shit. Pardon my English. The next thing is that Malaysia accuses China of breaching their airspace. China, I mean, again, did they breach the airspace? I wouldn't put it past them. They're provoking. It's like Taiwan, right? So it's like what China tries to do to fuck with Taiwan a little bit, right? So the next thing is that Tesla claimed they failed to stop Elon Musk from tweeting, says some regulators familiar with the matter. Again, when it says that Tesla claimed to fail to stop Elon Musk from tweeting, I would imagine they're referring to the board members of Tesla. I mean, again, the article was quite vague, though, at least the one that I read, and I read more than one just to be sure that I had the presumable facts straight. Again, from my understanding, and I could be very wrong here, but from my understanding, Elon Musk cannot tweet about regulated stocks the way that he tweets about crypto, right? So, but again, the guy will look. He's one of the richest people, if not, depending on the day, literally the richest person on the planet, at least on a public level, right? He could do what he wants, I guess. He could do what he wants. The next thing is that Biden is going to suspend the Trump drilling Arctic leases. The Arctic leases that Trump gave permission to do. Okay. I mean, I'm not sure if this is because of an environmental thing, the whole just going with the message of the Democratic Party, of the environment. I'm not sure. Could this be something much deeper? If it is, I doubt Biden knows. And if it is much deeper and Biden doesn't know, he's probably approached saying, sir, just sign this and shut up. Or maybe this just has to do with just defying Trump. Who knows, right? The next thing is that Amazon worker injuries have been reported to be 80% higher than competitors from a recent study. Yeah, no shit. I mean, look at how these people they're pissing, the Amazon drivers are pissing in bottles. No shit, they're going to be more prone to injury when they're forced to rush like that. No duh. I mean, what else, The next thing is that, again, I have to report this again, unfortunately, and the reason why is because I want to make this clear. There is growing hate crimes being thrown against Asian Americans. Again, folks, I try to say this regardless of your political perspective, or I try to get this message across, It's not the people. I'm sure there are some people, Chinese people, that side with the CCP. That's different. You can take up that problem with them separately and independently. But you cannot just see an Asian person walking down the street and go, hey, you're the reason for this. No, your government is arguably the cause of this for COVID, if we're talking about that, but not you. It's like I gave the example of a couple days ago. Just because I'm Italian, people don't, or they shouldn't at least walk up to me and say, "Hey, you got any connections to the mob?" It's the same. It's the same idea, I would imagine, right? So, the next thing is that let's see here. 5 people were arrested over a gang rape of a Belgian teen. Now, allegedly, this Belgian teenager, assuming I have my facts right, has committed suicide after she was raped by these five young adults, if you will, from my understanding. Again, throw them in prison, and if whatever happen, I'm sorry, this is, but when I see things like that, a woman gets gang raped, and then she commits suicide because she can't handle the PTSD from it and all that. I hope those, I'm not advocating for violence, but in a metaphorical sense, I hope those guys just, I hope they get taken care of in prison. Again, we all know that those lifelong prisoners in there, they don't take kindly to people that rape. And especially innocent women or children and things like that. So, once they get in jail or in top security prison, they'll be handled. Again, it's not up to me to decide, right? So to decide how much they should be punished. As a matter of fact, if I was one of these guys going to jail, I would not be worried about my legal prosecution as much as I would be about getting messed up in jail and probably getting murdered in jail. Seriously. And the next thing is that new Vatican laws toughen sexual abuse punishment. Excuse me. Okay, no. We're not touching this, and I'll tell you why. It's so hypocritical. I mean, it's just this is all optics. I'm sorry, but maybe there's some that actually do have a good heart within the Vatican, and I say that carefully. Some of you may have just laughed right now, saying, "Dave, you really believe that?" Again, folks, I'm leaning towards no on that. So And the final thing is that the Supreme Court in the U.S. will weigh in on the GOP's Voting Rights Act. There's been a strong argument that it limits, voting rights for people that are non-Caucasian or non-white, if you will. There's also another side of the argument saying that all it does is strengthen voting, so there's less fraud. So again, I have not read the bill myself in detail, so it's not up for me to tell you guys and girls what should be the case there. I encourage you to read the bill for yourself, but again, we have to present all the angles, or at least all the popular angles of the perspective. And that's it for today. We have a public a public episode coming out in the next, I guess, give or take 5 to 7 hours, and then we have another members episode as well too. So we'll catch all of you a little later in the day. Cheers.